So imagine you're trying to merge onto this like really busy high-speed highway,
Right.
but you're coming from a complete dead stop on the shoulder.
Oh, yeah. That's terrifying.
Right, it's horrible. And that's exactly the physiological and I guess psychological demand that we place on a student's brain the Monday after a school break.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy.
We just expect them to jump from, 0 to 70 miles an hour, like navigating these complex social dynamics and heavy academic workloads simply because the calendar flipped.
Exactly.
We treat the return to the classroom like we're just flipping a switch, right? And we completely ignore the mechanical friction of getting a human being back up to speed.
Yeah, and the friction of that transition is just immense. And, traditional educational models have historically, well, they've just lacked the infrastructure to manage it.
Right.
Which is why today we're analyzing this really fascinating operational and psychological brief.
Yeah, from Georgia, right.
Yes. From a K-12 mental health support system called MentalSpace School.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to comprehend why a massive statewide telehealth intervention like MentalSpace is even necessary, we kind of have to look closely at the biological reality of an interrupted routine.
Right, the biology of it.
Yeah, because I think the conventional wisdom just assumes that the highest stress point of a new semester or a post-holiday return is that very first morning. Teachers are prepping for the first bell, administration is on high alert, and parents are just focused on getting everyone out the door.
Just surviving Monday.
Exactly.
But the data and the clinical observation outlined in the source text, it paints a very different picture.
Really?
Yeah. The initial reentry is actually heavily buffered by adrenaline and novelty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So students are operating in this state of hyperarousal. They're focused purely on navigating the immediate environment.
So they're just running on fumes and excitement.
Pretty much. And
Yeah.
what's fascinating here is that the physiological and psychological crash actually hits the building on day 3.
Day 3. Okay, so Wednesday.
Wednesday. Because, over a week or two away from the building, the fundamental pillars of a student's daily structure, they shift.
Right.
Sleep schedules drift completely out of sync with those early morning alarms.
Oh, absolutely. My kids are up until midnight over break.
Exactly. And then peer groups, right? They communicate differently outside the walls of the school, so that requires a really complex social recalibration once they return.
Yeah, figuring out where you stand again.
Right. And then you have the sudden compounded weight of academic output that just resumes all at once.
So by the 72-hour mark, the adrenaline reserves that powered them through Monday and Tuesday are just entirely depleted.
Completely gone.
We're looking at a delayed collision of sleep debt, social anxiety, and just sheer cognitive demand.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a crowded classroom of 30 teenagers, a teacher can't simply look at a student and see their depleted adrenaline levels. And they don't have a meter above their heads. So how does this systemic crash actually manifest in the building?
Well, what's fascinating here is how it physicalizes in a real school setting.
Physicalizes, like symptoms.
Yes. The brief specifically notes a very predictable surge in clinic visits for somatic symptoms.
Wow.
Specifically, an influx of students reporting stomach aches or nausea, but without any clear viral or physiological cause.
Oh, so they're not actually sick.
Right. The body internalizes the overwhelming cognitive load of the transition and immediately redirects it to the physical form.
It's like the brain lacks the emotional vocabulary or perhaps the self-awareness to articulate that the social and academic overwhelm is too high, so the gut acts as the early warning system.
That's exactly it.
It functions as a check engine light for the nervous system. The stomach registers the threat before the conscious mind can even process it.
Yeah, the gut-brain axis is the primary translator for that overwhelm.
Right.
When the central nervous system perceives the external environment moving faster than the internal processing speed, it triggers a low-grade fight-or-flight response.
Oh, man. So cortisol is spiking.
Cortisol spikes, blood flow is redirected away from digestion, and the physical manifestation is abdominal cramping or nausea.
Wow.
And recognizing that this day 3 dip is a biological, predictable rhythm fundamentally changes how educators can approach that first week back.
Yeah, because they're not just dealing with bad behavior.
Exactly. They can transition from reacting to behavioral issues to actually designing environments that preempt the biological crash.
Which is huge. And the brief actually provides a strategic playbook for educators to mitigate the specific 72-hour vulnerability window.
It does. It's a 4-step playbook.
Right, and the foundational principle they use is deceptively simple. It's
Hmm.
rebuild routine before rebuilding pace.
Yeah,
The operating thesis here is that, quote, predictability is the intervention.
that phrase is so powerful. Predictability is the intervention. Because educational systems often conceptualize an intervention strictly as an action.
Right, like a meeting or a test.
Right. Pulling a student out of class, initiating a formal counseling session, or administering some diagnostic assessment. But this principle operates on the premise that the environment itself functions as clinical medicine.
Wow.
Yeah, when a student's internal stability is compromised by a disrupted sleep cycle or shifting peer dynamics, a rigid, highly predictable external environment dramatically reduces their cognitive load.
Okay, I see. So if the student walks into second period and knows exactly how the first 10 minutes of the block will unfold, like perhaps there's always a silent reading period or the agenda is always written on the exact same corner of the whiteboard.
Yes, exactly.
They don't have to allocate scarce mental bandwidth to scanning the room for unexpected variables.
Right, they could just breathe.
They can rely on the sheer, boring reliability of the structure to regulate their nervous system.
Boring is good in this context.
But, providing a predictable agenda doesn't automatically erase the internal panic a student feels when their stomach is in knots and they feel completely drained on a Wednesday morning.
No, it doesn't. And that brings us to the second step of the playbook. To address the internal experience, the brief advises educators to actively disarm the anxiety by naming the dip out loud to the classroom.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Imagine a teacher standing at the front of the room, acknowledging that feeling sluggish, overwhelmed, or physically off is a completely normal biological response to day 3 of a transition.
That would just neutralize the tension in the room instantly.
Exactly.
Because it removes the isolation. Like a student sitting in the back row with the stress-induced stomachache no longer assumes they're uniquely broken or, failing to handle reality.
Right.
The adult in the room has validated the physical sensation as a shared temporary hurdle that the entire group is experiencing.
Yes. And then for the third step, the adults in the building are also trained to observe these hurdles through a clinical lens rather than a disciplinary one.
Okay.
The text emphasizes that educators must track patterns rather than reacting to isolated incidents.
Oh.
Because a single emotional outburst, a missed homework assignment, or a morning of extreme lethargy, that's just ordinary human behavior.
Right. A rough Tuesday is simply a rough Tuesday.
Exactly.
Okay.
But a 3-day continuous streak of that same behavior warrants an entirely different protocol.
Okay.
The distinction between an isolated incident and a sustained pattern is what separates a student having a bad week from a student requiring immediate clinical support.
So let's follow that operational thread because this leads to the fourth step, right?
Right.
An educator tracks the pattern. They notice a student, let's call him Marcus.
Okay, Marcus.
So Marcus has been to the nurse with unexplained nausea for 3 consecutive days. His head is down on the desk, and he hasn't turned in any work since returning from fall break.
Okay, clearly a pattern.
Right. So the teacher flags Marcus's behavior to the school counselor. The playbook's directive at this stage is to execute a, quote, warm handoff, connecting the student immediately with a clinician rather than placing them on a waiting list.
Right, the warm handoff.
And this is where I have to push back heavily on the viability of this step in a real-world, underfunded public school setting.
I get it. It sounds impossible.
It really does. School counselors are managing caseloads of 300 to 400 students.
Yeah.
They are balancing college applications, state testing schedules, lunch duty, and immediate behavioral crises. You cannot magically conjure a licensed, available therapist out of thin air just because a teacher spotted a pattern.
No, you really can't.
In the traditional model, the counselor gives Marcus a pamphlet for community resources, calls a busy parent, and puts Marcus on a county mental health wait list that might stretch for, 6 to 8 months?
Easily.
And he falls entirely through the cracks.
Yeah, you cannot produce a clinician out of thin air within a traditional localized staffing model.
Right.
And that logistical impossibility is the exact friction point MentalSpace School was designed to bypass.
Okay.
The organization routes the student directly into a dedicated statewide telehealth network.
Yeah.
So the infrastructure allows partner districts to keep same-day teletherapy access open and staffed specifically during these high-friction reentry weeks.
Dang day. Wow.
Same day. The counselor flags Marcus, and the connection to a licensed clinician happens that day, securely inside the school building via telehealth.
See, here's where it gets really interesting, because the operational brief emphasizes a vital detail about how they staff this telehealth network.
Yes.
MentalSpace uses the dedicated therapist team for a specific school all year round. The school isn't just calling into a random call center of available therapists.
Right. Continuity of care is the bedrock of building trust, particularly with adolescents.
Oh, absolutely.
Without it, the therapeutic process breaks down rapidly. It is akin to a patient having to rerun their entire complex medical history from scratch every single time they visit a doctor for a checkup.
Yeah, it's like having to rewatch the painful first season of a heavy TV drama every time you want to see a new episode. It's just emotionally exhausting.
That is a great way to put it. The diagnostic fatigue alone makes teenagers abandon the process.
Totally.
They do not want to re-explain their family dynamics, their trauma history, or their anxiety triggers to a rotating cast of strangers on a screen.
So a dedicated team neutralizes that diagnostic fatigue because the clinician already knows the student's baseline.
Exactly.
And this structural division of labor also draws a very hard line regarding the scope of practice for the school staff.
This is so important. The source text is explicit on professional boundaries. Only a licensed clinician can diagnose.
Right. Teachers are not therapists.
Exactly. Teachers, principals, and school counselors are not amateur psychologists. They are not tasked with identifying generalized anxiety disorder or clinical depression.
Yeah.
MentalSpace empowers the educational staff to act purely as observers of patterns. Once the staff identifies the pattern, the telehealth infrastructure takes over the clinical diagnosis and the specialized treatment.
It creates a comprehensive, specialized ecosystem.
It does.
And the brief outlines that this ecosystem extends far beyond individual student teletherapy. Like, the model includes crisis intervention, suicide and violence prevention programs, family counseling, and crucial staff wellness support.
Staff wellness is a highly critical and, frankly, often neglected variable in educational outcomes.
Oh, 100%.
An educator cannot effectively co-regulate a classroom of anxious, dysregulated students if their own nervous system is operating in a state of chronic stress.
Right, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. Recognizing the school as an interconnected living community requires actively supporting the adults managing the environment.
Yeah.
Additionally, the clinicians deployed in this model are diverse and culturally competent, ensuring that the student body interacts with healthcare providers who actually understand their specific demographic and cultural context.
Which is so important. But building a robust, culturally competent telehealth ecosystem with same-day access is a massive logistical undertaking. And a sophisticated system like that in a public school setting immediately hits a brick wall, which is regulatory compliance and funding.
Oh, yeah. The red tape is real.
Right. Superintendents and school boards cannot integrate a platform without navigating a labyrinth of state and federal regulations. So how does this administration actually execute this on the business side in Georgia?
Well, administratively, the platform maintains strict HIPAA and FERPA compliance to protect both medical and educational privacy records.
Okay, so the privacy is locked down.
Yes. But the primary catalyst driving rapid adoption across Georgia districts is HB 268 compliance.
Right, HB 268. For those outside of Georgia, HB 268 is a state legislative mandate requiring all local education agencies to have formalized, actionable mental health and suicide prevention plans in place.
Yes.
And the brief points out there is a hard looming deadline for this compliance in July 2026.
Right. And whenever a state legislature enforces a mandate of this magnitude with a hard deadline, district administrators just scramble for scalable infrastructure.
Oh, I bet. It's panic mode.
Total panic. Piecemeal consulting or hiring one extra counselor per district is insufficient. MentalSpace provides the turnkey infrastructure to meet that legislative mandate efficiently across an entire district.
But the legal and administrative infrastructure solves one problem, right? The ultimate barrier in public education is always funding.
Always.
Mental health care is historically cost prohibitive. How does a district ensure that access isn't restricted only to families with premium health coverage?
So the commercial structure accepts major commercial insurance providers to cover the operational costs for families who have it.
Okay, so your standard Blue Cross, Aetna, things like that.
Exactly. But the most impactful detail regarding true educational equity lies in their Medicaid policy.
Okay.
For students covered under Medicaid, the out-of-pocket cost for this teletherapy is $0.
$0. Wow.
Zero.
So a school counselor can execute a warm handoff for the most vulnerable populations in the district without initiating a debt cycle for the family or handing them a bill they cannot pay.
Right. It shifts mental health care from a private, external luxury to a standard, accessible utility within the public school building.
That is incredible.
It is. And the outcomes reported in the brief demonstrate the cascading systemic effects of this structural shift.
Let's talk about those outcomes.
The data tracks an 85% family satisfaction rate,
Okay.
a 92% reduction in student anxiety,
Wow, 92%.
and an 89% improvement in attendance.
So what does this all mean? The attendance metric is particularly striking to me. An 89% improvement in attendance suggests a fundamental misdiagnosis by the educational system regarding why students were missing school in the first place.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we're looking at a profound paradigm shift in educational policy.
Yeah.
Historically, the structural response to absenteeism, missing work, or excessive tardiness was strictly punitive.
Right, you get detention.
Detention, in-school suspension, and truancy courts to force compliance. But the data strongly implies that a massive portion of what the system previously labeled as defiant behavior or truancy was actually untreated anxiety manifesting as avoidance.
The student wasn't avoiding the building out of malice or defiance.
No.
Their internal check engine light was flashing red, and they lacked the clinical on-ramp to safely merge into the high-speed academic traffic.
Exactly.
The moment you provide that on-ramp, through environmental predictability, culturally competent clinicians, and immediate therapeutic access, the attendance issue resolves itself organically.
It really does. The behavioral issues and the academic output issues stabilize alongside the attendance.
That's amazing.
When you address the physiological and psychological friction of the transition, the student's capacity to engage with the educational material naturally returns.
It just makes so much sense, and the interconnected nature of the mind, the physical body, and the external environment is universal.
Totally universal.
This operational brief focuses specifically on K-12 public schools in Georgia, but the psychological rhythms we are analyzing are not exclusive to teenagers navigating a fall break.
Not at all. The transition friction is a biological human constant.
Yeah.
Whether you are an executive managing a team's return to the office after a long holiday, a parent recalibrating household dynamics after a chaotic family vacation, or an individual professional navigating your own reentry to the workplace on a Monday morning.
Right.
The 72-hour window operates on the exact same biological rules.
So the day 3 crash hits the corporate office just as hard as it hits the middle school classroom.
Exactly.
Your return to work, the inbox is overflowing, colleagues are demanding updates, and the biological response is identical to the overwhelmed 14-year-old.
Yes. The adrenaline of the initial Monday return masks the cognitive exhaustion until Wednesday.
Wow, that is so true. Wednesday is always the hardest day.
Right. And the leadership strategies outlined in the school playbook, like rebuilding routine before demanding maximum productivity, normalizing the transition friction out loud in a morning meeting, and observing behavioral patterns in your team rather than reacting to a single missed deadline.
Yeah.
Those are highly effective, scalable management tools in any professional environment.
It fundamentally reframes how we should approach scheduling and output expectations following any major disruption to our routines.
It does, which leads to a final, provocative line of inquiry drawn directly from the brief's foundational rule.
Predictability is the intervention.
Predictability is the intervention. We see the clinical data proving how external predictability medically lowers anxiety for students navigating transitions.
Right.
It raises a significant question regarding how much of our own chronic daily adult anxiety is simply a physiological symptom of losing predictable routines in an increasingly chaotic, always-on culture.
Oh, that is so interesting because we tend to view routine purely as a productivity hack, like a calendar strategy to squeeze more tasks into an 8-hour window.
Right, time blocking and all that.
Yeah.
But if we reframe predictability not as a scheduling tool, but as a biological necessity for the nervous system to feel safe,
Wow.
could we actively intervene in our own adult lives?
Yeah.
What if we intentionally and rigorously scheduled our first 72 hours back from any break, treating that external structure as clinical medicine for our own transition anxiety?
It is a profound way to view self-management. Giving yourself the explicit permission to build a deliberate, structured on-ramp rather than demanding your brain hit 70 miles an hour the second you open your laptop.
Exactly.
Using routine to regulate the nervous system is a concept absolutely worth holding on to the next time any of us are facing a Monday morning.
I completely agree.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. The mental space model really is a fascinating glimpse into the future of mental health care, not just for students, but for how we understand human transitions across the board.
It really is.
Thanks for breaking it all down with us today.